Vayichan sham Yisrael neged ha'har ahar kulanu ke'echad.
Welcome everybody to Vayichan. It's an absolute pleasure to take part in this amazing project. Really on a year where our togetherness has been challenged on an unprecedented level. We could have just said, you know what, please God, there'll be other years, other opportunities, and many of us had settled for that. But Rav Tarragon had a vision and implemented that vision to make it a reality, to create a platform to foster greater unity than ever before. So a huge yashar koach to you and the whole team. And thank you for bringing the Ke'ish Echad, Belev Echad concept to life in such a real way, and for all the chizuk that it's giving so many of us. We're often called the people of the book. We could also be called the people of the mountain. So many of the significant moments in our history have taken place around a mountain. Even if we go back to the early days, the binding of Isaac on Mount Moriah, of course, the giving of the Torah at Har Sinai that we're going to be reliving in a few days' time, Mount Tabor, Mount Carmel, packed with experiences. The mountain's not just incidental, it clearly conveys its own message. There's something about the symbol of the mountain that is significant for us. Even if we just look at Mount Sinai, there's so much protocol regarding the mountain, not touching the mountain, where the people are allowed to stand, when the elders, together with Moses and Aaron, were allowed to approach, the wonders being manifest on the mountain. So what is the significance of the mountain? How does it impact the covenant we're entering into with Hashem? And what significance does it have for us today? So, Birshutchem, in order to explore this a little bit more, I'd like to contrast it with the opposite image, which is that of the cave. Caves also feature significantly in the Tanakh and in the Talmud, but interestingly, none of our really monumental national moments have taken place in a cave. So what I'd like to do is have a look at 3 episodes together. The first episode shows the cave as a refuge, a safe space, an incubator. The second episode conveys to us the dangers of the cave. And the third episode, in a very powerful way, encourages us to choose the symbol of the mountain over that of the cave. So and then hopefully we'll be able to plug all of that back into Mount Sinai and appreciate the significance of the mountain as a powerful symbol in Judaism. Let's start off with a scene that's fresh in our minds, having just come from Lag BaOmer, the story of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai that's related in the Talmud Bavli, Masechet Shabbat Lamed Gimel. And of course, over here, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai has fled to a cave with his son Elazar. He's wanted by the Romans. He's scared to be anywhere else, finds his way into a cave, and is miraculously sustained there by a carob tree that begins to sprout and a stream of water just outside the cave. And they're there for 12 years. And they have this very intense, pure existence where it's essentially a triangle between davening, learning, and eating carobs and drinking water. And that's the routine that they just continue, and it's just the two of them. So it's really just a time to connect, to learn, to focus. At the end of the 12 years, and this is what I would like to hone in on, is the way they're told to leave the cave, and this happens to them twice in a different way. The first time, Eliyahu Navi appears at the Pitra de Me'arta, the door of the cave, and he says, who's going to tell Bar Yochai that the Caesar has died and that they can come out of the decree has been nullified? He doesn't tell them directly, but in the knowledge that nobody else knows where they are, it's sort of like he appears there and it's hearsay. We don't see any communication between them. And it's obvious. If the Caesar's died and the decree has been nullified, they come out. But when they come out, we see that actually, having lived in a cave for 12 years with such an intense existence, They're not ready to just jump back into society and pick up where they left off. And of course, we're told that everywhere they look, their eyes burnt up the land. Whether that's literal or figurative, their existence is not compatible with the complex physical world around them. So, Yatzta Batkol, a voice comes out from the heavens now, Amar Lehem, and rebukes them in a significant way. It says, Lahachariv olami yatzatem, have you come out to destroy my world? Chizru limaratchem, go back to your cave. So they go back in for another 12 months, for one more year. And then the Bat Kol comes out again and says, Tzu'u mimaratchem, go out of your cave. So they come out. Now this contrasts to Eliyahu Navi. Eliyahu Navi didn't say, go out your cave. He just said the Caesar's died and the Gzeira has been nullified. The Bat Kol hones in on this cave almost as a symbol. You came to destroy my world? You haven't learned. Go back to your cave. Go back to your incubator. Go back to that place that sustained you, where you've connected, you've thought about spirituality, you've learnt Torah, you've prayed, and now you need to think about how that's going to come with you when you come back out into the world. And then comes the instruction after a year, which is also very clear, which is, don't think you can just transfer the cave into the world. The very nature of the cave is that it's closed. It's a refuge. It's a safe space. It's cut off from the rest of the world. Nothing can be diluted there. Nothing can be sullied. There's no noise. It's just total isolation. It's without any of those disturbances. But now, it's time to end that period. You have to be able to re-engage with the world again. And then starts a bridge period where they actually start to come out. They start to view the world in a different way. They start to understand how the people who are engaged in physicality in the world, it doesn't mean that they're bad just because they haven't been privy to the privilege of 12 years of just learning Torah and prayer that they've had. But, they spend their lives trying to make ends meet, and it doesn't mean that they're not doing it in a meaningful way and connecting with spirituality in their own way. But this bridge period is clearly significant. They're being told something about the cave, that the cave is the place where they were able to connect with their true essence, to develop themselves, to connect. And that's what we celebrate on Lag BaOmer. That fire, the passion, the story of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai that we talk about during this time period. All of that was nurtured during this time of being in the cave. However, that doesn't mean that you can just jump back in to the world from the life of the cave. And of course, this is something that's been sort of percolating in my mind during these days, especially here in England, where the government are just discussing the phases of coming out of lockdown, schools opening, a next phase for businesses, etc. That actually, we've, so to speak, been in a cave, this isolation time, and actually we're going to need a bridge period. We need to recognize the fact that we can't just jump back in, but actually it's going to be a transition for all of us. Now here we see the power of the cave, but also how it's not so easy to just come out the cave. And we're going to go into a very fascinating passage, which is also in Masechet Shabbat. It's talking about something totally different. It's a halachic passage which is dealing with what you can carry or wear out on Shabbat and what's considered carrying. And over here it says that you shouldn't wear a sandal hamasumar, a shoe that has nails in it. And the question is this something to do with the carrying? Or there seems to be something about the shoe with nails in that reminded people of a terrible tragedy in time, which was so great that if you saw somebody with such a shoe on Shabbat, it would ruin your Oneg Shabbat. It would make people feel so sad that they made a gezerah that you shouldn't go out with such a shoe on Shabbat. And the Gemara asked the question, Sandal Masumra Maitama, what is the reason that you can't go out with such a shoe on Shabbat? So Shmuel explains that there were people who had also, like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, they were escaping persecution, and they hid in the cave. And so people are gathering in this cave, and they make some rules for the cave. And one of the rules is Hanichnas yikanes v'hayotze al yetze. They will let people in. If other people also need to come and take refuge, they're allowed to join them in the cave, but people are not allowed to leave the cave. Now this is curious because surely it's just as dangerous, perhaps even more, to let people into a cave where there could be an ambush than to let somebody out which you can control. The story continues. That what happened in this cave? How did the sandal hamasumar, a shoe that has nails in it, become an icon of tragedy? It happened to be that one day somebody had the shoe on back to front, and therefore it looked like there was footprints of somebody leaving the cave instead of coming into the cave. So they thought somebody's gone out the cave and the enemies will see us and we're going to be, there'll be an ambush. They got so scared about this, that they started, to, in their panic and total anxiety, chaos broke out. And whether they trampled each other or pushed each other, they ended up killing each other. And more people were killed there than how many were killed by the enemies. What a tragedy. Seems to me there's something more to this story than what we are seeing here on the surface, which is, let's look at the cave as a symbol. The cave is a place where you're safe. You can control that environment. It's, as we said before with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, it's the incubator. It's easier to let people into my space where I can control that space. There's certainty. I understand what happens there. It's home turf. Then what happens when we go out into an unknown? And so even though perhaps we could say by logic, it's perhaps even more dangerous to allow people to come in than to go out. Psychologically or emotionally, for them, it was an easier point of control. You can come into our space, our place where we feel safe, it's our refuge, but we're not going to open that door into uncertainty and into danger. The minute they thought that the dreaded had happened, their anxiety was so great that they ended up panicking to the extent that more of them got killed than were killed by the enemy's persecution itself. There's almost somewhat of a tragic satire here in the way that this is being told over to us. And I think it's also saying something to us with regards to anxiety, which is that sometimes the thing that we are so scared of, the anticipation anxiety that it gives us, can do more damage than the actual enemy itself. And of course, an enemy can take on many forms. And once again, we're living in a time right now of huge anxiety, and we have a different type of an enemy in the form of this virus. But I think that that's something we've been grappling with as a society, which is what are the necessary precautions to take, what is anxiety taking us over. And this Gemara really speaks to me in the way that it tells us about this tragic episode. That actually sometimes we can be taken over by that anxiety, and the anxiety can do more than the thing we're anxious of itself. And of course, in terms of supporting others who might be anxious, this is also something that's so important in terms of understanding the huge impact that anxiety plays in our society. So here we see how the cave might be a safe space. But actually, it's in some ways, it lures us into a certain false sense of security, because it's just one small microcosm. It's not the real big world. And sometimes it actually is a way that by protecting us, it also means that we're hiding from things and we're not actually taking them on or tackling the real issues in order to overcome the challenges that face us. And so with that said, let's pause over here, and I want to pick up on the third episode. And this is where we're going to go back to our prophet Elijah. And over here we're going to go back into his story as it's related in the Tanakh. Now what's so fascinating over here is that Eliyahu has been spending time hiding in a cave because King Achav and Jezebel want to kill him, but eventually he's brought out of hiding in order to bring the rain. So he takes them on at Mount Carmel, and this is where we have a very, very famous episode. Essentially what Elijah is trying to do, Eliyahu is trying to recreate a Mount Sinai experience for the people. It's a national gathering, which was a huge feat to do at that time. They offer offerings that are offered up against the false prophets of the time. Their offerings are consumed, which shows that, there's this connection between God and the Jewish people, and the whole thing is just amazing. And the revelation, the people are so inspired, they all bow down and they say Hashem hu Elokim, Hashem is God. And this is an incredible achievement, one of the high points of Jewish history. Except that straight after this episode, the king and queen change their minds and decide they want to come back and they want to pursue Elijah. And at this point, he's just had enough. He can't take it anymore. And so he runs away from all civilization. He doesn't want to see another human being. And when he's got as far away as possible and he's taking refuge under a tree, he turns to God and he asks, I've had it. Please, could you just take my life? It's the end now. And something amazing happens over here, which is that, whenever we, especially when we're speaking to young people who are going through hard times, the first question we'll ask them is, who are your circles of support? Who do you have who would come and pick you up, who would notice the signs that you're not yourself and would be there for you? Now over here, Eliyahu has removed himself from society. He's not with another human being. The one who comes over here when all he wants to do is to die, a malach is sent to try and look after him. And the malach doesn't start talking to him about the big issues. The malach looks after the basics and says to him, Kum echol, just get up and have something to eat. And he looks after him and brings him food. And Eliyahu sits, he eats, he drinks, and he sleeps. And then the malach comes back to check in again. And he says to him, come on, you've got a long way to go. And Eliyahu goes on a journey that takes him 40 yom v'arba'im laila, just like Moshe Rabbeinu. So here we see he tried to create this, Har Sinai experience for the people. He's now going through the process that Moshe went through. And he's taken now, not just to Har Carmel, that he's trying to make it a quasi Har Sinai experience, but he's taken to Har HaElokim Harev, to Har Elokim itself. And he comes there, and now what happens is really interesting. He doesn't want to be on the mountain. He doesn't want the experience of being on the mountain anymore, right? So yes, he might have tried to create a Mount Sinai experience. He might have tried to be like the Moshe Rabbeinu who could keep the people going through the ups and the downs. He's done. He comes to a cave there, and he goes into the cave and he sleeps there. And the word of Hashem comes to him and says, Malachafu Eliyahu, what's wrong, Eliyahu? And then he gives his famous speech and he says, I was zealous for Hashem and the people had left you. And look what I've done. But at the end of the day, Ve'ivaterani levadi, here I am. I'm still all by myself. Yivakshu et nafshi lakachta. And they just want to still kill me. And Hashem says to him, say, go out of your cave. Va'amadeta v'har. You need to go and stand on the mountain. Lifnei Hashem. And this is where we have the epic moment where Hashem passes him with a great wind, and there's a great earthquake, and there's a fire, but Hashem's not in any of those things. And then comes the kol d'mamad hakal, silent, small, still sound. And that's when Eliyahu covers himself, Vayichan, and he goes out V'ya'amod petach ha'ma'ara, and he stands at the opening of the cave. V'hine elav kol, v'yomer malachafo Eliyahu. And Hashem turns him once again and says, what's wrong, Eliyahu? So what you have here is Eliyahu trying to make the bridge between the cave and the mountain. Hashem said to him, come out. And he comes to the opening, but he's too fearful or doesn't have it in him anymore to actually bring himself out of that cave. It's all got too much. And then Hashem asks him again, what's wrong? And it's at this point, Eliyahu repeats his speech. And when he repeats his speech, it's as if he hasn't taken in the message of what's just happened with his 40-day journey to the mountain and Hashem coming and finding the real power in the thin, still sound, the kol d'mamadaka. And so then Hashem says to him, Lech shuv ledarkacha, you need to go back on your journey again, because it's time to go to the next chapter of Jewish history, and Elisha is going to be picking up over here. And this is essentially the end of the narratives we're going to hear of him as a Navi. What's happened over here with the mountain and the cave? That Eliyahu cannot handle the fickle nature of human beings, the fact that the king and queen now want to kill him again, that they've lost their sense of morality, they've lost their sense of emet and what's true. How could it have happened? And Hashem almost puts him in a simulator. Do you think it was any different for Moshe Rabbeinu? He had to deal with the people making mistakes. You had the Egel that they did after just 40 days of getting the Torah. He stuck with them. Are you going to be able to stick with them? Or are you too stuck in where you are? Are you in a cave, or are you able to actually go out with a flexibility, with an understanding that the world's a big place, just like the mountain is exposed and it's out in the air in the big complex world? Are you going to be able to adapt, to be flexible, to help the people through this? Or is this all going to be too much for you? And indeed it was too much. Okay, you've done your piece. Now the role will be taken over by Elisha, who will be able to have the tenacity to deal with where the people are now and take them forward to the next place. And so we see over here how the cave and the mountain are juxtaposed together in a very powerful way. And this really brings us to be able to understand what the cave is. The cave protects. The cave nurtures. The cave allows us to understand who we are, to connect with our essence, to connect what's really important without all the noise, the distraction, the beeping, the tweets, the social media, whatever it might be in another person's life. That's the cave, blocks all of that out. It's simple, it's closed. But ultimately, it seems to be that we're also being told about the dangers of the cave. It lures us sometimes into a false sense of security. It takes us away from the connection with the world, the understanding that human beings will make mistakes, but how are we going to respond? What's the damage control going to be? Or are we just going to retreat back into our shell, which is the cave? And Eliyahu, even when he's taken to Har Chorev, he has to find the cave, and he can't quite get out, and he stands at the door of the cave. Just like when he goes to visit Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, you see how he stands there at the door of the cave. And so now we move to understand, well, what really then is the mountain all about? And the mountain is exposed, it's open, as we said, and whereas the cave is the incubator for a person to passively imbibe, the mountain image creates an image of active connecting from top to bottom. There's this symbol of the relationship between human beings and God. There's a line drawn from between heaven and earth. That was the momentous time of Matan Torah at Har Sinai, that we agreed to become God's partners in the physical world. And what's really interesting is that in literature, there's a whole genre of literature called mountain literature. Not to bore everybody, but maybe some of you will be into mountain literature. But the symbol of the mountain in mountain literature, it generally, pretty much always revolves around climbing to the summit. Whereas when you look at our narratives, none of them are about the climbing. What they're about is generally that we're at the bottom. and Hashem is at the top, meaning it's about the connection between heaven and earth. It's about the way that we connect as individuals with our relationship with Hashem. And so by receiving the Torah around a mountain, we're being given a mantle which, rather than demanding us to be insular, it's encouraging us to engage with the world, to being an Ariel Goyim, to engage with each other and to engage with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And just as Eliyahu was encouraged to choose the mountain, and it was demanded of Rabbi Shimon to leave the cave, we are empowered to believe in our tenacity, in our resilience, in our flexibility, coupled with the timelessness of Torah, to go from one generation to the next. And finally, climbing a mountain is about achieving the goal of going from point A to point B, the challenge of climbing, Kilimanjaro or whatever it is. Na'aseh v'nishma wasn't about agreeing to complete a task. That completion comes with a huge sense of fulfillment. That's not what the covenant was about. It's about the small moments. It's about living for something, about being the intrinsic link in the chain. It's less glorious, but it's about passing it on, l'dor v'dor, passing that baton on from one generation to the next. In essence, it's a timeless moment where we pass it. We're at the bottom, and we pass it on to the next. Just like we learn in Pirkei Avot, in Perek Bet, and Mishnah Tet Zayin, lo lechem lacha ligmar. You don't need to complete the task, but you can't not do it. You still have the responsibility, the privilege of being another link in the chain. And so, Be'ezrat Hashem, this Shavuot, in a unique way, we'll be able to say Na'aseh v'nishma, to reconnect with our role as Jewish people, as active partners with Hashem, to think about that line that connects us, the mountain, from the bottom to the top, and how we engage with it, and how we share that light with the rest of the world. And please God, it will be a time where we receive the Torah b'simcha u'b'pnimiyot, with great joy and with great health. Chag Sameach.